They once regretted being alive because of bullying, but now they are proud of themselves. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and relax as they tell Mirabelle and Michelle's story. Mirabelle and Michelle were 15-year-old twin sisters. From birth, people said they were ugly. Their eyes were too big, their ears too wide, their mouths too large, and their bodies too skinny. Wherever they went, people stared and whispered. Neighbors never called them by their real names. Instead, they shouted, "Ugly twins!" Some even laughed in their faces. Children in the street would point at them, mocking the way they walked, and adults never stopped them. At the well, women whispered loud enough for them to hear, "God really punished their parents with these ones." But school was the worst place of all. Their classmates created cruel names every single day. Monkey face, skeleton twins, big mouth monsters. The laughter of the whole class felt like knives cutting through their skin. Some students drew ugly cartoons of them and stuck them on their desks, just to see them cry. Even teachers, who should have protected them, joined in the humiliation. One teacher, tired of Michelle's trembling voice, snapped, "Don't waste our time. Sit down, you ugly girl." Another teacher sighed whenever Mirabelle raised her hand and muttered, "People like you will never go far in life." The words stabbed deeper than anything their classmates could say. Day after day, Mirabelle and Michelle carried those insults like heavy stones on their backs. They walked with their heads down, hoping no one would notice them, but they were always noticed. The eyes of the world followed them everywhere, mocking, judging, laughing. At home, they pretended everything was fine. When their mother asked, "How was school today?" they forced small smiles and said, "It was okay." But the truth was written in their swollen eyes and shaky voices. As soon as they entered their small room, they collapsed on their thin bed and cried silently until their pillows were wet. Sometimes Mirabelle wished she could disappear forever. Michelle often whispered, "Why did God even create us?" They began to regret being alive, because life felt like a punishment they never deserved. But in their darkest moments, they only had each other. When the pain became too much, Mirabelle held Michelle's hand tightly, and Michelle squeezed back. That simple touch reminded them they weren't completely alone. The world hated them, but at least they still had each other. The names never stopped. The laughter never ended. Every day was another round. But still, in their quiet suffering, the twins found a small, broken way to survive, not because they believed life would get better, but because they had no choice. They were Mirabelle and Michelle, the ugly twins everyone despised. And yet, behind closed doors, they were just two fragile girls begging for one thing, to be seen as human. Weeks passed. One morning their mother gave Mirabelle and Michelle a small basket and told them to go to the market to buy gary and onions. The sun was hot and the road smelled of wood smoke and fish. The market was loud, people selling, people shouting prices, people moving fast. But when the twins walked through, the noise turned sharp and small. Every face seemed to turn toward them. Some people only stared. Others did not bother with whispering. They said things out loud. A man by the yam stall spat, "See the ugly twins." A boy pushed past and called, "Monsters!" A woman with a baby on her back laughed so loud the whole stall laughed with her. The twins' footsteps grew lighter until it felt like they were walking on broken glass. They kept their heads down and tried to do what their mother had asked. Mirabelle clutched the basket so tight her knuckles were white. Michelle counted the items in her head, one by one, like a small prayer. They moved from stall to stall, but the voices followed them, a chorus they could not drown out. Then a woman stopped them near the spice cellar. She was a stranger with a sharp face and a mouth that seemed to enjoy the taste of other people's pain. She looked at them like she was reading a joke she had heard before. "Ah," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "the same twin monkey." Her voice was flat and heavy. There was no question in it, only the finality of someone who had decided their words were the law. Those words hit Mirabelle and Michelle like stones. Mirabelle felt the world tilt. Michelle's breath stuck somewhere behind her ribs. They could not move for a long second. Around them the market went on, sellers calling prices, a child crying. But for the twins everything slowed down to the woman's voice repeating itself in their heads. They finished the shopping on hands that did not feel like theirs. At home their mother looked up from the cooking and smiled, but the basket seemed too heavy to hand over. Mirabelle and Michelle sat on the little bench outside their door and did not speak. Their stomachs were tight and empty. The world had put names on them again, loud and sure, and the names would not rub off. That night they could not sleep. Mirabelle pressed her face to the thin pillow and pictured the woman's mouth forming the words. Michelle kept replaying the sound of the market laughter. They whispered to each other in low, broken voices. "Why did she say that?" Mirabelle asked. Michelle shook her head. "Because they can," she said. The answer was a small, bitter truth. The words of one woman had become a weight that sat on their chests. 4 days after, they moved like two slow shadows in the house. They ate less. Mirabelle's cheekbones looked sharper in the mirror. Michelle's hair fell out of place, and she didn't bother to fix it. Neighbors kept their distance. Some said, "That is how life is." Others said nothing at all. Their teachers did not ask what had happened at the market. At school, the gossip grew new teeth. The picture of them in someone's head had been sharpened and sharpened again until it hurt to look at it. At home, the twins tried to be small. They closed the door softly so their mother would not hear them cry. But silence does not keep pain inside forever. One afternoon, Michelle sat at the window and watched a group of girls walk by. They were loud, pretty, and careless with the world. Michelle felt a hot thing in her throat she could not name. Mirabelle put her hand over Michelle's and held on as if she could keep the storm outside from reaching them. Days turned into a small fog. The market words stayed with them, sitting like ash in their mouths. They began to dread leaving the house. When their mother asked why they were quiet, they said, "We are tired," and she sighed and worried but did not know the sharpness of the new wound. The woman's words had done more than hurt their feelings. The market had turned into a place where they no longer belonged. Each time they thought of going back, their legs felt heavier, like someone had tied weight to their ankles. At night, Mirabelle dreamed of mirrors that cracked when she touched them. Michelle dreamed of doors that would not open. They kept holding each other through those dreams, each squeeze of a hand saying, without words, "I am here." The days after the market were the hardest they had known. The world outside had spoken and chosen them. Inside, they learned how to survive the sound. When the days finally softened, Mirabelle said quietly, "Maybe we should stop going to school for a while." Michelle stared at her and then nodded. No one had to say it aloud, but each of them understood. The market woman's words had not only broken them for days, they had broken something that made leaving the house possible. The house grew smaller as they stopped moving through the world. Their mother tried to make the rooms bright. She boiled 2 cups of soup and knocked on the twins' door with small, hopeful jokes. But the market words had made a new rule. The twins lived by it now: lowered eyes, quieter steps, longer nights. They were alive, but the weight of other people's mouths pressed on them like weather they could not shelter from. They stopped going to school. For days Mirabelle and Michelle told their mother small lies. Their heads hurt, their tummies hurt, they were too tired. They hung at home like wilted plants and tried to make the house disappear around them. Their mother bought herbs and boiled tea. She worried, but she also watched her daughters with eyes that did not miss much. She knew why they did not want to go. She had seen the way their shoulders drooped when they walked, the way they flinched at every shout outside. One hot afternoon, when the sun made the roof sing, she called them into the tiny front room. She sat them down on the cracked wooden bench and took each of their hands in hers. "Stop lying to me," she said simply. Her voice was not angry. It was only steady. Mirabelle wiped her face with the back of her hand. Michelle hugged her knees like they could keep the world far away. Their mother stared at them, and for a moment the 3 of them were quiet in the small room. "Life is not rosary," she said, and the words fell like stones. "Life is not rosary. It is not full of pretty beads and easy prayers. Life is hard. People will say cruel things. They will point. They will call you names. But you must not let their mouths build the house you live in." Mirabelle's lip trembled. Michelle looked at the floor. Their mother held their hands tighter. "You two are twins," she said. "You have each other. That is something. Be strong for each other. Do not let one sharp voice make you small. When people speak like they own the world, they only show what lives inside them. Their words are not truth. They are only noise." She paused, and her face softened. "I do not say this to make it easy. I say it because I know you both. I have watched you sew a button when I had no thread, and I have seen you share the last orange even when you were hungry. Those things show who you are more than any name. Let those things be your answer." The twins listened. The market woman's words and the school laughter were still raw in their ears, but their mother's voice made a small room inside them where the hurt could rest and breathe. "Tomorrow," she said, "you will try. One day. Walk to school together. If someone says a word, do not answer with a cry. Hold each other's hands and keep walking. Make your own small rules. If you cannot go inside, sit under the tree near the gate and read. Do not let them win the place in your head." She squeezed their hands and then let them go. The house felt different after she spoke, not less full of pain, but less full of surrender. Her words alone did what no medicine or tea had done all week. They gave the twins a small courage. It was thin, like new cloth, but it was real. That night Mirabelle and Michelle lay awake and spoke in whispers. "Do you think we can do it?" Mirabelle asked. Michelle took a slow breath and said, "For you, I will try." They fell asleep holding hands. The next morning they dressed in their school uniforms. They walked slowly, side by side, and every step felt like a choice. People in the street looked at them with the same eyes. A few mouths opened and spread old names, but the sound did not stop them from moving. It was not victory. Words still cut. Teachers still looked away sometimes. But their mother's truth had planted a small root inside them, that the world's cruel voices were not the only measure of who they were. The twins learned, painfully and quietly, that strength could be built from small things, a mother's hard words, a shared hand, a promise to try again. They did not suddenly become brave. They trembled. They cried. But when one of them stumbled under mean words, the other would touch her arm, whisper, and steady her. Their mother's talk had not fixed the world. It had only changed what they would carry through it. And for Mirabelle and Michelle, that change was everything. Slowly, the heavy days began to change. Mirabelle and Michelle learned to hold their heads a little higher. Their mother's words stayed with them like warm cloth. They began to laugh more. Little by little, the mean names lost their power. When someone called them ugly twins, the words slid off like rain from a leaf. It did not mean the hurt never returned. Some nights they still cried, but most days a quiet new bravery grew inside them. At school they worked harder than anyone expected. They read every book they could find. They asked questions in class, even when their hands shook. They completed every assignment with care. Teachers who had once ignored them began to see the truth. Mirabelle had a bright mind that remembered facts and noticed details. Michelle had a sharp way of solving problems and making ideas simple. Together they studied late under the lamp, trading notes and helping each other learn. Soon their work became clear to everyone. They were the brightest students in many subjects. Classmates who had laughed at them before now watched in silence when Mirabelle stood and answered a hard question. Some boys who once teased took their heads down and would not meet their eyes. It was not revenge, it was the slow turning of respect. The twins kept being kind. They did not shout about their success. They let their notebooks and their marks speak. One day a visitor came to the school. He wore a dark suit and walked with the dignity of someone who had the city's names in his pocket. He was the commissioner for education. The whole school buzzed. Teachers straightened their notes and students sat up in their chairs. The commissioner moved down the rows, looking at faces and listening to the headmaster speak. His eyes were sharp, and he looked like a man who measured people by what they could do, not by what others said. When he passed the twins' desk, he paused. He looked at Mirabelle and Michelle for a long time. Maybe it was their faces that caught his eye first, or maybe it was the steady way they answered a question when the headmaster asked them something simple. He called them aside, right there in the classroom, and asked them to come to the front of the school. The twins walked slowly. Their palms were sweaty. For a moment the room felt like the market again, all eyes searching their faces. But this time the sound in the room was not cruel. It was full of a new kind of attention. The commissioner spoke in a voice that filled the hall. "Mirabelle, Michelle," he said, "I have watched many young people. I have seen those who learn and those who merely sit. I have seen courage in many small things. Today I want to reward work and promise a future." He told everyone that he had decided to pay for both Mirabelle and Michelle to go to university. He would arrange scholarships and help their family with school fees. The whole school gasped, and then the room exploded with cheers. Students clapped and some cried. Teachers hugged each other. Even the headmaster had tears in his eyes. Mirabelle felt dizzy. Michelle's knees nearly gave out. Their mouths opened and closed like fish. They had not expected this. No one had offered them anything so big before. The commissioner smiled kindly at them and said, "You have talent. Let no one tell you otherwise. Go and learn. Make your life what you want it to be." At home that evening, their mother wept as she held their hands. The neighbors who had once whispered now knocked on the door with warm words. The market woman, the one whose words had broken them before, stood at a distance and watched with something like regret on her face. The twins did not feel triumph or revenge. They felt relief and a slow, bright hope that warmed their chests like sunlight through glass. From that day, life changed in a way that was careful and steady. The mean names faded like old paint. The girls still had hard days, but they also had plans, books to read, places to go, dreams that were no longer only whispers. In classrooms and on the street, people began to call them by their real names again. Sometimes someone forgot and used the old names. The twins would only smile and keep walking, the sound of their shoes steady on the ground. Their story spread through the school as a quiet lesson. Hard work can change the shape of a life, and kindness, when you give it to yourself and each other, grows into something others must respect. Mirabelle and Michelle kept studying together, shoulder to shoulder, and the city watched as two small brave girls took the first steps toward a future they had once believed impossible. University opened a new world for Mirabelle and Michelle. For the first time they lived in a place where people cared more about what was in their heads than the shape of their faces. They met classmates from many places, made friends who laughed with them, not at them, and learned things that stretched their minds. They joined clubs, worked on group projects, and stayed up late talking about books, plans, and the future. They learned how to speak in public, how to write papers that mattered, and how to lead small teams. Sometimes they failed, a presentation that went wrong, a paper returned with hard red marks, but they learned from each mistake. Their confidence grew slowly, like a plant that pushes through soil. Mirabelle loved research and numbers. Michelle loved organizing people and telling a good story. Together they balanced each other and pushed each other forward. After graduation, they started working with local programs that helped young girls go to school. Their names and faces were already known in their community, but now people listened when they spoke about learning and dignity. They told their story honestly, about the market words, the teachers who did not care, and the mother who told them to be strong. Their story moved people because it was true. One day, an international organization contacted them. Someone there had read about the twins, how they had worked hard and refused to let cruel words decide their future. The organization wanted them to be the faces of a new campaign across Africa about education, self-worth, and the power of kindness. The offer was huge: travel, talks, videos, and a chance to reach millions. Mirabelle and Michelle were surprised, afraid, and proud all at once. They talked it over late into the night, holding hands like they always had. Then they said yes. The campaign changed everything. They traveled to different countries, met community leaders, visited schools, and stood on stages where hundreds, sometimes thousands, listened to them. They spoke simply and honestly. They said that names do not hold power unless you give it to them. They spoke about reading late under a lamp, about the market that had hurt them, and about their mother's steady voice. People cried when they spoke. People clapped. Young girls came up after events and hugged them, saying, "You are like me." They met presidents, ministers, and teachers. Important people listened and promised support for school programs. Journalists asked questions, and television cameras followed their smiles around cities. Their faces, once objected to and mocked, were now in posters, billboards, and online stories that celebrated difference and hard work. They used this new attention to push for school fees to be lowered, for teacher training about kindness, and for spaces where children could learn without fear. Even so, the twins stayed the same in small ways. They still met in the same little cafe when they could, still shared a single plate of fried plantain, still called home every weekend. They never forgot the market woman's words. Instead, they used that memory like a map to help others who felt lost. As the campaign spread, their story reached countries they had only read about. People wrote to them from far places, saying how brave they were. The sisters learned to handle praise the way they had once handled ridicule, with quiet steadiness and thanks. They used interviews to speak about policy, about compassion, and about how schools must teach kindness as much as reading. Years passed and the sisters grew into women who carried the past like a worn book. Pages remembered, lessons learned, not hidden. Where once people had pointed and laughed, now they called them inspiring, strong, brilliant. The words had changed places. The mouths that once named them now named their work and their heart. When the international organization launched their campaign across Africa, Mirabelle and Michelle were on its posters. They walked into towns and cities where children pointed at their faces and smiled. The twins no longer flinched. They would bend down, say hello, and tell each child, learn. Be kind. You are more than their words. They had become the faces of hope for many. From being called cruel names in a market to speaking to leaders and helping shape programs for children across a continent, their journey showed the slow, steady power of courage and learning. The ugly twins, as the world had once called them, were now celebrated for being different and for using their story to make life better for others. When Mirabelle and Michelle came home after their work and travels, the little house smelled the same, stew and smoke and the soft tiredness of long days. But everything felt different. The twins had learned much, and they carried the new life in their hands like warm bread. Their mother stood at the gate when she saw them. Her face opened into a smile that broke and healed all at once. She ran to them and held them so tight that the years of worry seemed to fall away for a moment. They told her everything, the towns they had visited, the people who listened when they spoke, the schools they helped build with the money from the campaign. Their mother listened with eyes that shone. When they finished, she only said, "You are my daughters." Her voice was small and full, and it shook the twins more than any loud praise ever had. Mirabelle and Michelle wanted to repay that love. They remembered the nights their mother had sat up sewing, the days she had given what little she had so they could eat. So they began to work with a new plan in their hearts. They saved, spoke to people who could help, and used the support they had earned to build something steady for the woman who had never stopped believing in them. They built a big house for their mother, with a wide door, bright windows, and a small garden where she could plant flowers and herbs. The house was not only strong against rain and sun, it was a place where the twins' mother could sit and laugh out loud without fear of being heard for pity or gossip. On the day the family moved in, the whole neighborhood came. Some came with warm food, others came because they remembered the old small lives and wanted to see the new one. Their mother walked through the rooms with soft, amazed steps, her hands touching the walls as if she were reading the house like a blessing. The people who had once mocked Mirabelle and Michelle watched the change. The market woman who had shouted, "Twin monkey," now stood with sour lips as the twins' car, small but new, pulled up. The boys who had called them names at school kept their heads down. Those who laughed in the past felt the slow, sharp regret of time. Some tried to hide it behind jokes, some tried to pretend it never mattered. A few came to the gate and spoke haltingly, trying to offer help or praise. The twins did not shout or punish. They let regret be its own lesson. Still, the change did not erase the past. The memory of hurt stayed like a scar, a map of where they had been. But the twins had learned a better way to meet old pain, with kindness and with quiet dignity. When the market woman tried to apologize, Mirabelle simply nodded and said, "We forgive you," because forgiveness was the bridge they wanted to build, not a wall. Other people watched and learned that day that mercy can be stronger than anger, and that generosity can teach what cruelty never could. Years later, neighbors would tell new children the twins' story in different tones. Some spoke of it as a lesson, some as a miracle, others as a warning. The twins lived their lives busy with work and with service, helping girls go back to school, speaking in small halls, and visiting their mother every morning for tea. Their fame never changed them into different people. They stayed gentle, careful with words, and quick to laugh. They still held hands when they walked, and they still cried into each other's sleeves during nights that felt heavy. When someone in the neighborhood tried to say something cruel, people who had once watched silently now spoke up. A new quiet had settled where old cruelty once lived. Not everyone changed, but enough did. The twins had not only built a house, they had helped build a small community that remembered better. On warm evenings, the family sat in the garden and talked. Their mother would tell the story of the first time she fed them both with the same small spoon. The twins would bow their heads and say thank you. They knew that no house could fix every wound, but a safe place to sleep, food on the table, and a mother's laugh were strong medicines. And they never forgot to tell others the one short truth they learned. Do not let words break you. Use what you have to help those who have less. Be kind. Be brave. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this YouTube channel for more interesting stories.